Good evening. I'd like to call to order the workshop of October 19th, 2020. First on the agenda is our communication plan update with Liz Allen and Brian Wood, Assistant City Manager, presenting. Ms. Allen, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Mayor and Council, as usual, I'm honored to be here with you this evening. My name is Liz Allen. I am your Director of Communications and Community Engagement, and I'm here to talk a little bit about communications and progress made so far by the new communications and community engagement team. So I'm here to check in with you about our efforts to strengthen Auburn's municipal communications efforts. As you know, during our recent strategic planning process, communications emerged as one of the city's leading, highest strategic priorities. As a result, I'm proud to report that Auburn is making significant progress toward improving our internal and our external communications. So I love this slide. We've made communications a civic priority, thanks to all of you and the people who live in this community. This is something I believe will be the key to our success, communications-wise. Now more than ever, effective communication with citizens is essential. It encourages participation and engagement. It builds community pride and trust in our leadership and our staff. It attracts new businesses, new residents, and a strong, talented employees to join our organization. I wanted to let you know about some of the progress we've made, some of the steps we've taken toward our goal of improved communications. First, we took a huge step forward in putting the right staff together as a team, and we named that team the Communications and Community Engagement Department. It's a division of the City Manager's Office, as you know. This team is comprised of myself and two other very talented individuals, Rosemary Mosher, our data analytics and visualization specialist. That one's a mouthful. And Phil Larley, who runs Great Falls Television. Our team was established in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. And while that has been very challenging for everyone, we're flourishing nonetheless. We meet regularly and we collaborate all the time. And we do that not just with our own team, but with every city department here in Auburn. While a great deal of what we do is focused on external communications and connecting with the community, we've also made a concerted effort to support and strengthen our staff and internal communications as well. One of the more exciting, for me anyway, and outwardly visible accomplishments we've made is the installation of two gorgeous new LED signs within the city. The first can be seen right here on the side of Auburn Hall, and the second is situated right in the heart of New Auburn at the intersection of South Main, Mill, and 2nd Street, where they all converge. These new signs allow us to connect with people in a very direct way, kind of while they're hostage audience right at the stoplights coming in from many different directions. It lets them know about important city events and programs and initiatives. For example, right now there are multiple slides on there promoting the election tomorrow, and they've been in place for a while now, which has been great, educating people on our new polling places and that they could vote early and that we have a drop box, etc. The signs also allow us to promote public health and safety, which is a huge priority for the city, from the importance of wearing masks and maintaining physical distance, but also to our impending, I'm guessing, many winter parking bans and things like that. We've also recently created a City of Auburn Instagram page, so this is another tool in our tool belt of social media. Having a great time with it, actually. Instagram is interesting because it's very photo-based. So it's a whole different approach. You can't just make a post. It has to have a really thoughtful graphic or photograph with it. We were, as part of our pandemic response, we were looking to connect with as many people as possible, and the addition of this social media platform has been a great addition for our team. Okay. Progress on mapping, data visualization, and hubs. Rosemary Mosher, I know you hear her name a lot. She continues to do exceptional work as part of the communications team. I don't think there's a city council workshop or meeting that goes by that does not feature a map, a hub, a story map, a dashboard. I know you're all seeing this stuff all the time, and she has really transformed the way we look at data in the best possible way, and the way we look at our community. Of special note are some of the recent projects you'll see on this slide here that she's been working on. This is only scratches the surface of the volume of things she's doing. You can see the COVID-19 response and resource hub site, which is still up and active and updated quite frequently. The elections and voting hub site was amazing, if I do say so. She did a remarkable job with that. Also under construction, a comp plan update site, which is going to be a great tool in that whole process. The residential permitting dashboard, a breathtaking, I'm going to float it now because it's coming soon, a breathtaking Anniversary Park story map that'll have some videos and other really great things. And people from across the country who've been purchasing those beautiful commemorative bricks will be able to click on the brick and actually see a picture of it if they're not able to visit us here in Auburn and take a look at it themselves. So that's coming soon, and that's just, like I said, scratches the surface of some of the work she's doing. Truly remarkable. Other progress being made, Great Falls Television. I am delighted to report that Great Falls TV has seen a resurgence lately as well. Phil Lurley is a wonderful part of the team, and he's doing some really fun projects, actually. I think he's having a great time and putting out some really remarkable product. From shooting, producing video tours of our police and fire departments to some fire prevention training video. I know we just shot one the other day about, not smoke detector, what are they? Fire extinguisher training, that kind of thing. He's also been making his way around the city to get some stock photography that we can use in various documents and kind of build that resource for the communications team. So Phil's making the most of his talent and skills. Another overwhelmingly positive development for Great Falls TV has been the move back to our original broadcast channels on Spectrum Cable. While our government and community channels can still be found on 1301, 1302, 1303, they have been restored to their original location at channels 7, 11, and 22. We don't know how long the 1300s will be in effect, but we're back where we were originally, and that's a great comfort. And I think more people will find these broadcasts as they flick through their channels. A little preview there. That fire department tour was wonderful. It was part of their Fire Prevention Week education. It can be found on our YouTube channel. I wanted to touch on some of what's next for our department. The first next step includes each of you. In the springtime, we'll be planning another council retreat. The city manager has requested that the agenda include work toward creating a mission and vision for the city of Auburn. We don't currently have one, and I think it's critically important. It's critically important because it's that will drive the mission and vision will drive our city's branding efforts and communication efforts, potentially including the design of a new logo for the city if that's a direction you want to go in. It will certainly affect a refresh of our city website, which is long overdue, potentially a new app for the city, and having a mission and vision that we can all embrace as a community is going to help drive that beautifully. In a few minutes, Assistant City Manager will briefly explain the concept of establishing a nonprofit entity to promote Auburn. It's a really exciting concept we've been noodling with the past few days, and I look forward to having him share that with you. Let's see. The purpose of those would be to promote Auburn and impact the community. But before doing that, I'd like to talk to you about the communications plan. So our communications plan, I have some content blocks here that are going to lay the groundwork for what that plan is going to shape up to be. The plan will describe our approach and objectives for communications and community engagement, and how it supports and relates to our strategic plan, as well as our vision and our key messages. It will also identify our partners and stakeholders, our audience, if you will. It will identify our tools and resources, the various communication assets that we have at our disposal, how to use them, and then perhaps most importantly, our plans for implementation of the plan, as well as measures for evaluation and how successful the plan is for us. Our hope is that the plan will serve as a resource and as a commitment to effective communications and meaningful engagement opportunities for the community, a two-way street back and forth with reliable, sound, trustworthy messaging and consistent branding from the City of Auburn. So, without further ado, Assistant City Manager Brian Wood will tell you a little bit about the DC Bid Council. Bids are business improvement districts.
Great. Thank you, Liz. So one of the things that we've been definitely grappling with, and the city manager and Liz and myself have all been trying to think about creative ways to continue the directive that the council has given us around marketing of Auburn. As Liz always reminds us, she does communications, not marketing. And so we have had the opportunity to have very preliminary conversations with a firm that does do marketing. And one of the things that was the initial kind of low-hanging fruit that we could really start engaging with now is the creation of a nonprofit for the city. And one of its core mission, its core mission would be to market, to advance the city. And so one of the things that immediately popped into my mind was something that we had in the District of Columbia, known as business improvement districts. And what's unique about them is that they are nonprofit organizations that all work collaboratively as part of a larger council, and they work in very specific neighborhoods. So if you want to think of a business improvement district, here would be downtown, New Auburn, one potentially on Minot Avenue. And so it starts with a focus on businesses, bringing them together, understanding the businesses that are in the area, for those planners in the room, kind of thinking about a small area plan, and putting together a cohesive and comprehensive understanding of the demographics of people that live there, work there, and play there. And I think that's something that's extremely important as we continue to move forward, talking about the next phases around housing, around business growth, around attracting and retaining new residents. And so this could be a tool that would work hand in hand with the city, and would also have the ability and flexibility to do a number of things that the city is doing right now, but maybe do it a little bit more quickly, and potentially engage people in a different way. So low-hanging fruit is opportunity to go after some grants or potentially fundraise in a different way. But one of the things that I will say that businesses have definitely articulated in areas where this has been set up is that the value add is so great that they have no problem paying a very small percentage of their overall sales to support this business. To support these bids all across the district, and this is a model that's been used in cities all across the United States. So they run programs like ambassador programs. So you think about New Year's Eve, you think about the Hot Air Balloon Festival and other events that are going on downtown. Well, we want to make sure that people that come from near and far are able to understand the restaurants that are in the area. And while you're here, maybe you want to go and check out a play that might be going on. I mean, I think there's a number of different opportunities that we want to make sure that we have literature and information available to individuals when they come, so that they continue to think and have both a positive experience, but also are exposed to other gems that they may not have initially thought about exploring, or maybe they want to go out to a couple of our great farms. So that is a concept that I think certainly would be interesting to explore here, and I think something that would continue the furtherance of this effort and definitely create an arm that would allow the city to continue to move forward, but would also be a great partner for the city, but engage businesses in a slightly different way.
And before you move on to the next point, are you finished on the bid concept? I believe you're going to probably need some, at least consensus or thoughts on that from the council before they move forward with that concept or exploring it further. Is it something that you all want to look at a little bit more deeper?
So can you tell me exactly what you mean by, what would that entail?
What we've been doing, just so you know, what we've been doing is getting consensus during workshops, just on thought process. We hate to have staff waste of time if right out of the gate there's not enough consensus, or at least understanding to explore something a little bit deeper. It doesn't mean you're binding into it or voting on anything. It's just like, yeah, this is something that is intriguing and worth staff time.
So we're saying, giving staff permission to pursue this.
Giving a little bit more consensus, so that way they know they have some support to investigate further, without binding anyone to an agreement.
I have a clarifying question. Is the bid concept tied to the nonprofit, working toward having a nonprofit that would do marketing for the city? Is that connected to the business
Sure.
districts or not?
Sure. So the bid is one concept of a nonprofit that
Oh, okay.
we would be able to easily stand up. That would also be a significant portion of the overall marketing effort of the city. I don't think that they would necessarily be the implementing agency. I think we would probably want to move forward with a marketing plan a little bit more quickly, as this would take a little bit of time to stand up and fully operationalize. But I think it does give us the opportunity to go after some immediate things, such as a $10,000 a month Google award that they hand out to nonprofits. That would be a first step in our marketing plan.
And one more question. Is it the Business Improvement District, is that a federal or state designation, or is this just a common moniker used?
It's a common nonprofit 501c3 that fold together to an executive bid council for the District of Columbia. And again, other cities have that same model. And those executive councils and executive directors of each of those bids work very closely with the District of Columbia or other cities. And in the process of standing those up, as areas are designated as potentials for bids, the city works hand in hand with identifying those, and they're initially called kind of a Main Street concept. And so opportunities for grants, so that you can have a clean team out there that's potentially sweeping and cleaning the neighborhood, is kind of like the initial step as the bid kind of takes off.
Nice. Thank you.
Just another quick, this is a game changer, and I think it's a really intriguing idea. And I was just talking to the mayor about new staff coming to the hospital, and nobody's talking to them about Auburn and moving to Auburn and what is there. So the idea of ambassadors kind of across the board is a great idea. One small question, in terms of the LA Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce, do we leverage them to help with this? Is this, just what's the relationship? I mean, would you imagine? I know it's not established yet.
Sure. What I would imagine, and again, presuming not to get too far ahead anywhere, is I think there's definitely an opportunity for partnership here. I think what's great about this concept is that it really is kind of narrowly focused on a very finite geographic area. And so the opportunity to kind of know the ins and outs, the nooks and crannies of these areas, the demographics, what opportunities might be most viable in a very specific storefront, I think is a granularity that would then be able to be taken to the chamber. And so I think that there's definitely a cohesion or synergy there.
Great.
As a reminder too, this was actually itemized in our strategic plan for a downtown development nonprofit as well. I can't remember the exact terminology we used in the strategic plan. Your concept takes that downtown and expands it out to different areas, of course, but it is prescribed in the strategic plan as something to explore with a high priority level, if I remember correctly. Councilor Garrett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's a pretty great idea. Before we get too carried away, maybe you should talk with the Auburn Businessmen's Group, which is different than Auburn Business Development Corporation. Because at one point, they were the highlight of Auburn. They did a lot of fundraising and a lot of mutual things for all our different events. They're still there, but maybe all they need is a kick in the tush to get them motivated, as well as if there's other ways that we can recharge their batteries, as well as, like you said, maybe fundraise and get grants. I don't want to sell them short because they are one of the key blocks of Auburn. And before we get too carried, I would like you to have a sit-down meeting with them, find out their concerns and questions. Who knows, maybe they would like to spearhead this endeavor.
So we do work real closely with Auburn Business Association. They obviously put on our holiday decorations, and so they're right on track. They meet regularly. We have a staff member that's on their board that's meeting with them. They're doing a great job. We did talk about in our internal meeting about as we create, if we were to move in this direction, or do we partner with? And so I think bringing up Auburn Business Association as a partner is right on track where we're looking at. But I would say as a board, they're doing outstanding things, and they had a great, even during this time, they had a great fundraiser for their golf tournament, and a lot of those proceeds are going to go to the new direct decorations that are going to be at Anniversary Park, because that's, a lot of people may not realize it, but those decorations come from Auburn Business Association. So I just want to make sure you know that they are doing great work. So I think as we look at this, you know, the downtown district is what was highlighted in the strategic plan. If we can focus in this one area to begin with, that's really creates a lot of opportunities. The fact that Brian has worked closely with this concept it really helps us and leverages us in a good place. We'll take a look. One thing that will happen is before any steps take place, you know, that will come back to you. But if the general concept is where we're headed, that this makes sense, this can really bring some attention to our areas like downtown. And because we had two programs that really we struggled with, and that was the 150th anniversary and also the New Year's Eve. Even though it was part of 150th, New Year's Eve is a project all on its own. But as a city, we really had to thread that needle on how do we create opportunity for sponsors, how do we create going out and reaching out to supporters, being able to have this arm from the city to be able to do this work would be critical for us to be able to move forward in this direction.
Yeah, and I will say, and I think Councilor Mills had a question, to emphasize that, on the 150th, threading the needle is a really good analogy because I was constantly soliciting contributions, but you had to be very careful that I'm not soliciting contributions for the 150th and thereby starving a contribution or a sponsorship to the Norway Savings Bank Arena or Ingersoll or what have you. So there was that because I represented the city, and so didn't Liz and Mark and Sabrina and other staff members. It was very, very challenging. And same thing with New Year's Eve Auburn, which is going to be a reoccurring event, that it needs to have that own individual group that runs it, you know, sort of like the Great Falls Balloon Festival, if you would. So I think for everything downtown, it makes sense. But Steve?
It sounds like an interesting idea. I'm curious when it says funded by property owners?
Well, I would say that's one model.
Because that's what it said on the thing. I was just reading
For
that.
DC, it is.
Yeah, for DC, that's a model that the property owners have adopted, and they have the opportunity to set the rate. It's not a government mandate.
Is it commercial property,
Yes.
residential? Okay.
No, not resident. It's 100% commercial in the District of Columbia.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you saw all those businesses on that, those were all the contributing members.
And then how was the board decided in DC? Is that appointed by like the city council or?
Nope, it's totally independent as a nonprofit. So once you stand up the nonprofit, an executive director is installed and paid through that revenue. And a board can come through any number of manners. It depends on the charter. For most of the bids in the district, it starts initially by applicants from that bid, the businesses voting on them, and then from there the board is at least initially installed.
And I will say, it's a good time to really look at this. Like, right now is a perfect time, frankly, because we have the marketing communication plan coming out, but we also have, we're halfway through the process of reorganizing our boards and committees. One of the boards was the Community Advisory Board. Now, as we're contemplating everything and looking how everything fits together, it's not out of the realm of possibility to see the chair of that nonprofit, reporting out to the Community Advisory Board, which has 2 counselors on it, and you can put in there, because, you don't want, we've seen in Auburn, we have to learn from our own history, we've seen nonprofits potentially go off historically on their own thing without any communication to the city, and that's lost, and you can go after competing interests. But we can build this now with those learnings, I think, together in order for there to be, execute a mission, give it the autonomy it needs, but still have a check and balance.
And to that point, Mayor and Council, one of the, again, interesting things about this particular collaboration is exactly that. Not only, I think it would be a phenomenal idea that they would be a part of that structure, and while the district didn't have those unique opportunities to engage, one of the things that they did do was come before City Council once a year to report out on any of the city-funded grants that they received, and just the programming overall and some of the statistics. So there's still very much that relationship, so that you don't have that kind of moving into left field without awareness.
So, Council, is this something worth projecting forward or moving forward with, and getting obviously more information?
I'd like to see it funded, the grant funding outside of the, if you can find funding that isn't city funding.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay, yeah.
Well, let's explore different
Yeah.
funding methodologies, frame ups. So I think we're all in consensus here. We've got nods across. Mr. Wood, Ms. Allen? Good. And I'm sorry, I thought it was a good time to stop there, but if there's more, please continue.
No, I think that's it
Okay.
for this.
Thank you for your time.
Is there any general questions for Ms. Allen or Mr. Wood at this time? No? Thank you very much for your time this evening. I know it probably feels like 8 o'clock with daylight savings time, so I'm about ready to fall asleep right here. Next on the agenda, we have Justin Poirier for a presentation of, hold on, I lost my page. We're talking about, I should know this, Court Street plan, of course.
Yes.
So, Mr. Poirier, you are up, and Mr. Wood, thank you.
So I'm here to just go over, we went through the Court Street study, and we looked at the different recommendations from the consultant on that, and we put together sort of a project list. We have a limited amount of funds that are available that were put in the last budget. I think, Jill or Mr. Manager, I think there's about 120,000, and there was a little more, but I think some of it's been used for some other things, so in that ballpark. So we went through with engineering, and we put some really preliminary cost estimates on some of these project areas. And we just wanted to sort of get feedback about what you thought the priorities were as we went forward. So I'm just going to quickly go through the maps here, if I can just zoom out a little bit. These might be hard to see on here. I hope you have these in your packets. I think you do. So this first one is Goff Street and Court. The idea here is to create another crosswalk on this intersection right here where I'm pointing with the cursor. Currently, there's no crosswalk there, and there isn't a curb cut at this intersection. From what I've heard of people that live in that area, kids and people do cross there even though there's no crosswalk because it's the shortest distance. The other recommendation is put a no left turn sign at the end of Goff Street turning onto Court, and to put in that green median in the middle so that traffic will queue up in a single file fashion there. That arrow is in the wrong place when we shrunk the map down to get it to fit in a normal page. It slid over, and I apologize for that. But it's supposed to just be pointing at this other crosswalk here that I mentioned before. That's about it on that. Are there any questions as I go through? I mean, this is pretty straightforward, but yes.
I just had a question about that. What is the benefit of being able to go straight through there but not take a left-hand turn?
Excuse me?
So from putting a no left turn sign, that would be off of Goff onto Court,
Yes.
but I could still go straight across? Wouldn't that still cause the same queue?
I'm not a traffic engineer, so I'm not sure. These were just the recommendations that were in the Court Street improvement, and I just tried to list them out in a way that you could digest them on a cost sheet.
The only access really would be to go to the bank or to the water district. There's no access off that road beyond that.
There is a lot of detail in the Court Street study. It talks about queuing and has all the traffic counts and all that, if it is something that you're interested in. This next one is Court and Union Street. Now, what I'm going to say here is there are a lot of suggested changes in this. Engineering says that we would need a more detailed engineering schematic to do all this stuff, so there's no cost associated with this one at this point because it's too complicated with draining. But I'll quickly go through. If you look on this side, they're bumping out the curb, so they're making it, trying to widen that curb to slow down traffic. They're doing the same thing on the other side. They're widening the curb, and they're installing more prominent traffic medians. When you move these curbs around, there are catch basins and all kinds of drainage issues that has to be taken into account that we can't do in-house, so we would need to hire outside expertise for that. So I don't have any costs on that. One of the suggestions in this area was to close the entrance to Denny's, but I don't have that here on this particular plan at the moment because that's sort of, there's some politics involved in that. We just wanted to keep it really straightforward on what the options are available for improving this corridor.
Just a quick question, going back, the
Yep.
Denny's entrance and exit, to the right of that, there's something that says possible closure of. Do we know what that is?
Get to that one on another slide. We slide down a little bit, and it's part of another project.
Okay,
So
thank you.
You said the widening of the curb, so that means there's going to be less road and more sidewalk?
That's correct.
Okay.
And it doesn't even necessarily mean sidewalk. It could be an esplanade. It could be whatever is designed for that strip.
So for people that want to take a right there, there's going to be less room to take a right?
It reduces the number of lanes to one. Yes, it reduces the number of lanes, and generally the idea for that is traffic calming. You're trying to slow the traffic down. If you narrow the lanes, and if you have less lanes across, cars tend to go slower, which would then improve the ability for pedestrians to get across the intersection when the traffic is slowed.
It'd be hard to go slower through there. I mean, it's slow already through there. Okay.
So here we are. This one here is coming off of Railroad Street. The idea would be to install some type of bollards there to prevent a left-hand turn coming onto Court Street.
Sorry, what's a bollard?
A bollard is like a post. It's something that you physically can't drive through. They can either be the temporary ones that they bolt down. You see sometimes they're bolted in and they're plastic and they can be run over, or they could be concrete where you can't move them. Sometimes the temporary ones are favored by public works departments because they can be removed in the winter and they don't have to worry about hitting them with snow plows and things like that. And the possible closure would be the possible closure of this street here. It's not in our first cut of recommendations, but that's what that was referring to before. I've lost my cost list here. So this would be to install the bollards and then a no left turn sign, again, coming off of Railroad Street. And that's all that's on this slide.
Can I ask a question about the closure of those roads on the slide up there again? The same thing that Councilor Azania asked. So the closure, where it says possible closure of roads, that's over the railroad tracks on both of them. Was that supposed to be moved up further, or what are those possible road closures there?
This was an item that is not necessarily recommended by the study, but it was one that was given out as an option to try to reduce. There are other ways to get around in this area. You don't necessarily have to use that street, so it was just a suggestion that there's a possibility that you could just dead end the street. so that traffic can't cut through
Is it that
those.
parking lot, I think is the question, right? Is
Right.
what
Yeah,
are
is
you
it the
talking
parking
about?
lot and then what's on the bottom left side that would require closure?
I'm not sure what's on the bottom left side because it's not part of our recommendations, and I can't see it on this map, and I don't remember what it was referring to.
I think that parking lot
There's a driving
goes
school
through
there
to
that
the
goes
next
through.
road, I think, right? Over by the,
So you have the one at Thai Dish, is that the one you mean?
Right, is
Comes
that
in
the one that we're
backside
looking
of
to
that.
close?
So that's not being proposed to close, that's the other exit that you would come off and take a right, off from, out of that exit to the right. But the recommendation was, should Railroad Road be closed, and during the hearings, we had conversations about that. That got added on here, but it's not the recommendation in this round to do anything with that, is what Justin's implying, is that you're gonna see some things on the sheet, that's not what we're moving forward with. The things that Justin tells you about, that's what the recommendations are for next steps.
I think
these are
part
the
of that.
map-
Oh, sorry. Being part of the conversation, I remember that there's a lot of pedestrian activity that happens crossing that railroad, crossing Court Street, and that's a really unsafe place for pedestrian activity, given how wide it is there. So closing off that road would help to divert some of that, hopefully divert some of that pedestrian activity to other safer spots.
I've got a question. How do these improvements affect the muffler dealership right by the library? Are we going to be impeding their business?
I'm not sure. I don't know how to answer that question. I'm not sure. That's a good point.
I think that will come, that's going to come to during public comment, the next stages. I had an office for several years, kind of diagonal from there. I don't think, and based upon this, my personal opinions, I don't think it's going to actually affect them. Their traffic is coming up. There's ways around there too, but we should reach out and talk with them. Again, public comment, notification of abutters, all that will happen.
Because that was one of my concerns back when this study was being proposed and started to be worked on. How was it going to affect them as well as any other businesses on that street?
I just want to remind people at home as well as the council, all this is coming forth after a lot of public comment, a lot of advertising, Councilor Boss, you were involved in a lot of those meetings too, in the Court Street study. This has been going on for a year and a half-ish?
If not longer. And during the public comment, numerous public comment periods, there were businesses from downtown Court Street that were represented there as well.
So, I mean, if we want to put this into context, this is not the initial stages of this by any means. This is really going, I don't want to say that necessarily the 11th hour. Mr. Poirier, what do you think? If you'd have to use that clock analogy, where are we at? We're about 9 p.m. here, 6 p.m.?
Court Street study, and there was also the pedestrian safety mitigation plan that was done by MDOT, and a lot of them line up the same. The suggestions are very similar, and I'll talk about some opportunities we're going to have with with state monies when I'm done going through.
Very good. But at this stage, when we're talking here right now, we're pretty far along this project. Now it's just about making some final decisions, correct? Okay.
So the next one is a crosswalk here on Pleasant Street. We put in rapid flashing beacons and a bump out on the southern end right here. The bump out allows the pedestrian to be further into the street so they can be seen by traffic before they have to actually step off of a curb. And to install pavement markings, yield pavement markings before the crosswalks in either direction, just to give traffic a heads up that there is a crosswalk up ahead. This is one of the more involved ones where we don't necessarily have complete consensus from DPW or engineering at this point on one of these. The idea is to improve the median in the middle, widen this curb on this side, add parallel parking up along here, so we'd reduce a lane going on to Turner Street from Court. And this curb right here will require some further engineering to figure out, because there are some catch basins in this area and the water needs to go somewhere, and the same is true on the other side. So there needs to be more engineering, but this is one one idea to calm the traffic turning onto Turner Street. Everybody knows that they pick up speed going around that corner. And the last one, these are some pretty major improvements here, and I have an understanding there's a lot of interest in this area on Turner Street and Hampshire Street. So we'd install rapid flashing beacons again on this crosswalk here down at the bottom. We'd improve bump outs and improve a pedestrian, I'm missing the term, a refuge island, there we go, I was missing the term on what we call these. And would reduce the entrance, narrow the entrance to Great Falls Plaza to one lane. So right here. And increase the shoulder on the east side to 11 feet. Now, those were all of the recommendations that we're putting forward. Now, this one right here is estimated to cost anywhere from $150,000 to $200,000, so we don't have the money for that in the budget right now, but if it is the number one priority.
This slide right here, okay.
This particular one is quite expensive because of the draining requirements, and the same could be true for the Turner and Court Street because of draining and underground utilities that we're not quite sure what would have to be done yet. But that being said, we were contacted just a week or so, which kind of changes the tenor of this conversation, from Maine DOT, and they have monies available for pedestrian safety improvements. And the cities that had one of these pedestrian mitigation plans done are priority. And for the City of Auburn, it just happens to line up that Court Street is the number one priority in our pedestrian mitigation safety plan. So we don't have all of this money, hasn't been approved yet, but there's a potential that we could get $100,000 in 2021 from the state and up to $500,000 in 2023. If we were to receive those monies, it would pay for basically all of these improvements that were recommended in the plan. So the idea is just which ones you consider to be the most important heading into the next construction season, because ideally we could put some of the low-hanging fruit out to bid this winter and maybe get some of it built next summer or spring.
Could you just go back, Justin, just so as they're forming their questions, maybe debating, can you go back to the slide that has the amounts for each of those
Yes.
projects, so then we can maybe have the conversation go from there? Sorry, Councilor Carey, go ahead.
I guess my question, I understand the last two slides. I understand at least the next to last slide insofar as adding the parking and the pedestrian issues that we've always had in that section of the road. What I'm curious about is on the last slide, the picture of the roadway, it looks like that we are continuing that on up the street because of the wide turnout coming off Great Falls Plaza. And it looks like that they're putting parking along that area. Was there an idea of a reason why that they were going to do that and how far up the parking goes?
On Turner Street itself, the parallel parking from the corner on Court up to, is that what you're?
Towards the rail bridge.
Yes. The idea, again, is just to narrow the street corridor, and it's just dead space, so you can add parking in there. Once you come around the corner, you wouldn't necessarily want the lane to then go back out to where that is. So there's just opportunity there. It doesn't necessarily have to be parking. If you wanted the curb to just be pushed all the way to the street and not take advantage of that opportunity for parking, that would be an option as well. But
Councilor Milks, you had a question?
On this, obviously, there's need in front of where the Y is and that sort of thing. Has it been looked at traffic flow there? Because I know during the day that the traffic can back up all the way across Hampshire Street to try and get through that light that's on Court Street to turn left onto Court Street. And I think going to the right there, it gets backed up and you're looking at some really heavy congestion in there during the day. So would part of the study be timing of those lights in a certain way to minimize the congestion for traffic? Because sometimes it takes 2 or 3 lights to get through
Yep.
in front of the Y.
The Court Street study makes assumptions based on traffic up to, I think, 2045. And there are certain levels that they consider acceptable in queuing and certain queuing of cars and the delays that it takes. And those metrics are in the report that they use. So there's certain assumptions that they made about how much queuing is going to be acceptable to the public and whether it's going to make impacts back onto further intersections. Everything that is in these designs that I have presented tonight all seemed acceptable to the consultant within the ranges that they had worked up for traffic counts.
And to that point as well, that was based on an assumption of a certain percentage of growth in the downtown as well. So projecting downtown economic growth, will it be acceptable? And it all passed through a software program that did all this modeling.
To take what Councilor Boss said just a step further too. When we look at all of our retreats, the mission statement, if you would, of what this council wants to do downtown out, I want to just remind everybody of that because it kind of naturally would choose, if you would, the improvements here on Turner Street and Court Street as the first steps, the 2021 plan, and then radiate west of that, further up Court Street, up Gulf Hill, as funds become available through additional state grants and so forth. But I think that's where that natural evolution would come from. It also allow us to probably better market and help the owners of Great Falls Plaza market for development there, which would then force some of the necessity of additional on-street parking too, depending on what was going there. But regardless of what went there, there'd be a net negative effect on parking. So I do think this kind of ties into our economic development plans, what we've done as a council to help speed those plans along. That's just kind of me reminding all of us, including myself, what some of our priorities were. Any other comments or questions?
One more thought is I like that approach to starting and then radiating west. The one piece that stands out to me is that, if I recall from the study, I don't have it in front of me, but there was a really high crash volume at that Goff Street turn. So if we could prioritize that as well, I think that was a lower cost to put a sign, the no left-hand turn.
Yeah.
There was some data that
that's
showed that was
very
like the
dangerous.
highest crash rate in the whole downtown area, so.
And that kind of makes sense too. I think when we talk about priority, I think there's also a fiscal overlay that needs to happen there as well. I mean, there's some really low cost, low effort activities that can calm traffic or help with safety. Safety should always be a priority, even over our economic development, of course. So yeah, it makes sense. I think, prioritizing cheap, easy fixes with signage and information following by downtown west kind of makes sense. Again, I think finances are going to dictate based upon what you could come up with. Yeah. And council, do you have any questions for Mr. Poirier or Mr. Wood at this time on this? No? It makes sense. I mean, this is, again, where I think we're at the end stage of, now that I really think about it, it's been years and years of discussion. I think the last time Court Street was redone was 2005, even before then, well over 15, maybe 20 years ago. So, yeah, it's time. Yeah, late 90s, I think you're right.
I just had a quick question.
Yeah.
Going forward with what the mayor's saying, if we were to start kind of centrally here and radiate out, does that cause any concerns for anything being done before anything else? So if we build up down here and fix it, does that cause a massive queue because we need to wait 2 more years to fix up towards Denny's? Or are these
Depends where
separate
you-
enough to?
The only ones where you might want to be considered of that is the Court and Turner Street and the Turner and Hampshire Street area, just because of the way that we're reconfiguring those intersections. Those all are going to require more engineering work. So I think I have the direction here, if I understand it. It's just that you'd like to do the low-hanging fruit first, and if we have any money left over with our current allocation, we can use that maybe to do some of the studies on the larger projects so that we have them available to come back to you later.
And then once we start getting some bigger grants or even allocating money from our regular normal budget, then push forward. But I do think as part of our old downtown vision, this is a critical step that needs to be addressed. And I hate to wait another 5 years before we address it. So I think sooner is better, especially if it's going to promote further economic activity, which will enhance our tax base. So, and I do, the slowing of the traffic, I smile and I think about other cities of like size and the slowness of their traffic and the purposefulness, if I can say the word, of why traffic is a little bit slower. And I've had so many, I mean, again, I had an office at the Engine House for years, and my office looked out over Court Street, and I would literally stand in the middle of Court Street with that yield for pedestrian sign, holding it and watching cars zip by me because nobody cared, and it's just, we have to, I think it's going to take time, but we have to start thinking about that. So we can't say we're pedestrian friendly unless we actually act on it. So, anything else? Thank you. Look forward to it. Only 2 seasons in Maine, snow and construction. Very good. That's the end of our workshops for this evening. We do have on the agenda 2 executive sessions before our regular scheduled meeting at 7 p.m. So I'm going to ask for a motion to discuss an executive session on economic development pursuant to 1 MRSA, Section 405, 6C.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Carey and a second from Councilor McLeod. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None being, we'll now stand in executive session. We will then have 1 additional executive session. We'll be back live on the air at 7 p.m. Just wait a second. We'll clear the room. I'd like to call to order the meeting of November 2nd, 2020 already. Thank you. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Turn for that thing again. Good evening, everybody. It's been an eventful night. I'd like to start this meeting off with our consent items, which we actually have none of. So moving right along, we have the minutes of the October 19th regular council meeting. Are there any corrections?
I have one correction. The executive session for labor negotiations, the motion was made by Counselor Walker and then seconded by Counselor Carrier. In the minutes, it just says Counselor and Counselor.
Walker, second, Counselor Carrier. Very good. Duly noted on that correction. We'll have the minutes corrected for that. Are there any other corrections? None being, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as corrected of the October 19th, 2020 regular city council meeting.
Second.
And a motion from Counselor Milk, second from Counselor Boss. Show of hands, all those in favor? Opposed, abstained, none being, passes by votes of 0. We're going to move on to communications. We do have a nice letter I just want to touch upon very quickly here. It's in our packet, and it's open to the public too, from Mr. Oliver Brown, who lives in the Fern Street neighborhood. Just to paraphrase, he was inquiring about taking 2 vacant lots, 7 and 9 Fern Street, and potentially converting them into community gardens. Just so you know, those lots are adjacent to the Lake Street School. I believe it's the RET Center, RECT? RETC, thank you. Center run by the school department. Those lots are owned by the school department after a cursory look. They are buildable infill lots. So I think that, it's a great idea, and I'd like to direct city staff to look at that a little bit further to see, is there a widespread need for community gardens in that neighborhood for our next CDBG project? And if that is truly a good place for them, or if there's any other land, and if the school department has a desire to sell that land or for infill. So there's a couple things up in the air, but I want to thank Mr. Oliver for bringing that to our attention, because frankly, we didn't realize.
Nope, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, go on.
Just a quick question would be the building maintenance and all of that, because St. Mary's Nutrition Center has done a good job with all the other gardens, so it would just be who would then be responsible?
Usually, that we'll leave it out to staff. I don't know. We're not ready to make any of those decisions, but, we
Make
do have a,
sure.
existing community garden project funded by CDBG. So if the council's good with that, I'd like to, let staff loose on looking at all the different variables and possibilities of development, selling that land to individuals to build homes, et cetera, or community garden there or someplace else. They'll come back to us later with some more details. Okay. Moving on to COVID-19 update. Deputy Chief Matt Fifield is not with us tonight. Prepping for election day tomorrow morning. Mr. Manager, I didn't know if you wanted to update us further on that?
Sure, I can give a couple updates. I did tell Matt he didn't need to come in. He'll be here around 4 in the morning, overseeing elections. So, and as you'll notice, the city clerk is not here either. She's still working downstairs, again, finalizing most of the election efforts that take place. Matt's been working with Sue over the last, we've been planning this for a long time, but directly right here and at our other polling locations, just to ensure that they are ready and prepared to go. When this meeting is done, at some point, Public Works will be coming in and setting this up, this council chamber for one of our wards to be a polling location. For COVID updates, I do not have his report, as he's been certainly busy. All of you know, or I'm assuming you know, of the uptick that we've seen in the state of Maine. The numbers that have been coming out did require the governor to make some adjustments with the not reopening bars as scheduled, which would have taken place today, and then also changing the indoor gathering from 100 down to 50 capacity max, or less depending on square footage of the building. So that's adjustments that we're making to all of our facilities, taking a look at obviously Norway Savings Bank Arena as one of the critical locations. If you remember when we had our workshop with the school superintendent and the school chair. We talked about really a need for the school to take a look at bringing somebody on board like what Matt does for the city, for the school. They have done that. And Matt has really worked closely with this person, and they worked together on the positive case that came out of Auburn Middle School and worked through that. So I'm really glad that the school moved in that direction. That certainly has alleviated some of the workload for Matt, but they are collaborating together just to get the work done. We're not seeing the response from Maine CDC as we would hope. We still have not received a call back from the Auburn Middle School student that tested positive. And so it's been a fair amount of time now. I know the state's obviously busy with outbreaks in different areas, but that just shows why it's important that we have individuals that are doing all the groundwork on contact tracing, notifications, and getting that work done. So I'm really pleased with the team and what they are doing. And we'll continue looking at evaluating our policies and safe practices. That's it, Mr. Mayor.
Very good. Well, I'll open this up to council communications. I'll go first on this one. Real quickly, congratulations on staff and the hundreds of participants in our citywide Halloween efforts at the Rec Center in New Auburn. That was put on by United New Auburn Association, did a great job there. In Anniversary Park, showcasing that. And as well as our drive-in movies that we had in Auburn. I had random calls throughout the evening saying, what's going on in Auburn? Did you know there's a huge screen and scary clowns on the screen? So it was, we had It showing for the late night adult only movie. And then some great movies earlier on. Very well attended. I'm looking forward to seeing that as a huge asset for the entire community for years to come. So congratulations to everybody. Other than that, there seems to be an election tomorrow. Please go out there and vote. It's a big one. And so please get out there and vote. If there's any indication, my daughter, every time she hears, and she's 12, hears a political campaign, she goes, why are people lying all the time? So, it's time for it to be over. Get out there, vote. 52% of Auburn has already voted. So there should not be massive lines. Go online, know where your voting place is, call up a counselor, call up City Hall, go online. We have so many different communication messages or methodologies out there to help with this. And do not be afraid of going out and voting, because so many people already have. Normal, I believe, historic voter turnout in Auburn is 70%. 52% of our registered voters have already voted. So we know it's going to be even substantially less than last year, even with consolidating our 5 polling locations to 3. So we're going to have everything done correctly. So I just want to make sure everybody is very confident in voting. I've had people reach out to me during this meeting asking me questions. So there you go. That's my communication. I don't think there's anything more important to the future of our republic as voting day. So we'll go around the room. We'll start over here with Councilor Carey. Councilor Gary.
Nothing at this moment.
Councilor McLeod.
Just to piggyback off voting, LATC is offering fare free bus rides tomorrow in the entire city.
That's a change.
You're welcome.
Outstanding job working on that. Good job. Thank you. So fair wide, I can ride the bus for free tomorrow.
Ken?
Okay.
Nothing at this time.
Nope.
Councilor
And just vote.
and Mr. Manager. No, we're in the clear. We're going to move this on to open sessions. First open session of the night. Members of the public are invited to speak to the council about any issue directly related to city business, which is not on the agenda. If you'd like to speak, just please raise your hand using the raise hand feature on the Zoom. In case you're not aware, we're doing Zoom public comment tonight because we're trying to preserve the community room for voting tomorrow. Is there anybody? No one's attending the Zoom right now, so there's nobody here for open session. I'm going to close the first open session of the evening. We're going to move on to unfinished business. This is, we have ordinance 07-10192020. This is a public hearing and second reading. which is amending Appendix A, which is our fee schedule for delegated reviews of traffic, stormwater, and site location of development permits as proposed by staff during a previous workshop. I'll entertain a motion at this time.
Second.
Motion, Counselor Boss, second from Counselor Carrier. Open this up to the public. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak?
One side.
I'm sorry? Bunzai?
Very
There's
similar.
currently no one signed on.
Oh, it's signed on. I'm pretty sure it's Bunzai. Okay, so we're in the clear. No one is waiting, okay? Move up to council. Council, any conversation, debate? None being, I'll ask for a vote. We're going to need a roll call vote on this. Mr. Wood or Ms. Eastman? Ms. Eastman. If you can, please.
Counselor Milks,
Yes?
Counselor Carrier,
Yes.
Counselor Boss,
Yes.
Counselor Gary,
Yes.
Counselor Lasagna,
Yes.
Yes.
The order passes. Second reading by a vote of 7-0. Moving along to new business. We have ordinance 08-11022020. This is a first reading. This is adopting the proposed amendments to Chapter 14, Article 18, Adult Use and Medical Marijuana Business, Section 14-656, Section 14-658, and Section 14-659 of the ordinances of the City of Auburn. First reading. I'll entertain a motion at this time.
Second.
A motion for Councilor Carey, a second for Councilor McLeod. This is a public hearing. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak on this topic?
None at this time.
None at this time. We are now going to bring it back to the council. Council, is there any debate or conversation? Everything was in your packet, including the amendments.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just make a clarifying statement. We did workshop this on October 5th. Since that time, we had this worked up and going back through the state changes. There was an addition to this, and that's in your first bullet of your information sheet. We already talked about the 4-year residency requirement that was deemed unconstitutional, change in the state statute. The other piece that changed in the state statute that we weren't aware of until now, but we've added it in this language, is that a visiting patient from a qualifying state, they are allowed to purchase medical marijuana, but not cultivate or transfer. We had that as a prohibited option within our ordinance, so this proposed change removes that and makes it in compliance with the state statute. So that is it.
Very good. If you all bear with me, I'm going to interrupt the process at this moment. I'm going to take about a 30-second pause. I just got a message saying that our Zoom public participation login was not working accurately. So before we continue with debate, I just want to make sure that it is. Okay? So we'll stand in recess for just a minute. Don't want to keep going on if people are trying to talk and they can't.
Yeah.
Don't know what they were commenting on, do you?
I don't. If I have to open, we do have a second open session, so we can cover that. I just want to err on the side of caution on this one.
This was your own public hearing.
Yeah, we had open session. We'll have a second open session. So that's fine, and I will have, if anybody wants to jump in, if this is truly broken, then we'll just open up public session for this before we start council debate.
The bedtime yet?
Feels like it.
Going back and forth with the time is ridiculous.
Because the darkness is
Canada.
just brutal. It's like a curtain just comes.
If we do it and find out we go clear and done tonight.
That's what I want.
I made it last night, actually.
Yeah.
It's still getting up at 7.
It's like, woke up this morning.
But she'll cure anything that's wrong with you. Are we all set?
I just popped up.
We're logged in now? Okay.
It's just us. That's just other staff logging in, make sure that's logging. It's working.
So the link that was on the agenda is correct? Okay, very good. Okay. Now to declare the council out of workshop, thank you very much for holding. I wanted to make sure that everything was working. I'm going to give it a second here. Is there anybody, and I'm going to go back. This is a first public reading. Is there anybody from the public who would like to speak on this ordinance? And if so, we'll keep watching. We're going to enter into council debate. If anybody from the public jumps in and actually wants to speak, raise your hand. I'll stop everything we're doing and allow the public to speak, okay? Council, questions on this after you heard what the city manager had to say? None? Okay. Okay, it looks like we're clear. I don't think anybody is logging in that would like to speak that hadn't before on this topic. So I am going to ask for a roll call vote if I can at this time.
Counselor Milks,
Yes?
Counselor Carrier,
Yes.
Counselor Boss,
Yes.
Counselor Gary,
Yes.
Counselor Zazanya,
Yes.
and Counselor McLeod.
Yes.
Order passes by a vote of 6-0. Just also let the record show that Councilor Walker from Ward 5 is with an excused absence, traveling today. Next, we have ordinance 09-11-022020. This is the first reading, and I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
A motion from Councilor Boss, second from Councilor Milks. This is adopting the proposed amendments to Chapter 60, Article 9, Home Occupation Regulations, 60-738 of the ordinances of the city. It's also the first reading. I have a motion, and is there anybody from the public who would like to speak tonight on this motion or this order?
No hands are raised.
Very good. I'll move on then. Council, do you have any questions or comments or debate?
Can you just quickly say what this is?
So
for the
this is
public?
it's in that same information sheet, this as it pertains to square footage, that it will not exceed 500 square feet of a home residence for a home occupation permit, where this came as a result of a neighborhood meeting in North Auburn with a business that was basically just purchased a home to create a business out of that home. For marijuana cultivation, this all ties in, this all ties into the marijuana ordinance. But it's a separate section under home occupation.
Question. You said 500 square feet? Whatever you said, how big a room is that?
25 by 25.
5 by 25. It's a big room.
Oof.
It's about a little bit smaller than this one, I think.
Half the size. For about half the 25 by 25? Half the size of this room, a little less. Okay. Any other questions or conversations?
I just would like to thank the manager and also Eric Cousins for attending to this. It was really important in that community, and I have gotten feedback that they are very pleased at how quickly the city addressed this issue.
Very good, then. I will ask for a roll call vote.
Counselor Milks,
Yes.
Counselor Carrier,
Yes.
Counselor Boss,
Yes.
Counselor Gary,
No.
Counselor Lasagna,
Yes.
Counselor McLeod.
Yes.
Order passes first reading. A vote 5-1. Next, we have ordinance 10-11-022020. This is the first reading again. This is adopting the proposed amendments to Chapter 12, Article 4, Housing Code, Division 1. Generally, Section 12-146 section and 12-226 of the ordinance of the City of Auburn. This is a first reading. Do I have a motion?
Moved. Second.
Motion, Councilor Gary, and a second from Councilor Boss. Open this up to the public. Anybody from the public like to speak at this time?
No hands are currently raised.
No hands currently raised at this time. Bring it back to the council. Council?
Mr. Manager, can you also read, just articulate what this is for the community, for the public?
Mr. Manager, do you have it right? Phil, you get it?
I can pull it up.
There's 445.
36 and 42.
So council, as you recall, this was presented by Eric Cousins at a previous workshop. As I'm looking to pull it up, as I mentioned before, Eric was unable to participate this evening. I think that as we talked about blighted areas, really looking at major deficiencies within buildings within the community. This isn't about requiring somebody to paint their home unless it's a major concern, a major issue, especially as it refers to lead paint. So this is really taking a look. This had come before the council in the past. We had took some of the comments from the council, modified this, and brought it back before you with changes that we felt were appropriate and ones that would really be able to leverage staff to be able to work on some of the houses that have either been abandoned, neglected, or really in such disrepair that individuals should not be habitating them at this point. So that's what this ordinance will do for you.
You can call it aesthetics, anti-blight. Also looks at really focusing in on crime as well.
Yeah.
And calls, 911 calls, emergency calls there too. And also, if you remember that, you'll see in our next meeting, we will have a order written up. I know finance has to look through how to phrase it and account for it, taking the delta between tax acquired properties, the sale, and what is actually owed to the city. That delta, that difference, overage, if you would then be applied towards a fund in order to provide financial help for those that can't afford to make those repairs. That way, there's always kind of, we're never penalizing anyone for not being able to afford to repair their home, especially seniors. So, Councilor Boss?
It was just to remind us all about that funding that we're making available and to say that it's a really good process, that this policy is really critical for health and safety and economic development, but we can't do it without supporting people who can't implement it. So I'm really glad to see the two of those things paired together.
And actually even, because that is a variable depending upon year after year, tax acquired properties sell, if they don't sell and so forth. But there's also our community development block grant funding. We do have a lot of established funding already in the form of low-interest loans or grants to help too. I think tying everything together will actually help get some of this money used, because so often it's not. It's being rolled over year after year. So there's some benefits there across the board. But Councilor Gary?
Mayor, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Mayor, and our city manager for putting all the pieces together for this extra funding to help those that desperately need the money and not just blowing off. I mean, it's one thing to own a property and be a vacant landlord and not take care of the place and don't give a crap and have people live in unsafe conditions. But there's another thing is if they're elderly or people on a fixed income that can't afford it, at least you've got a fund to help those that are really wanting to look out for their people to have a mechanism to access. So I thank you both for that. If it wasn't for this component piece, I wouldn't be supporting this tonight. So thank you.
Any other comments on this? Debate? No? Straightforward. Okay, and I'm going to ask for another roll call vote.
Councilor Milks.
Yes?
Councilor Carrier.
Yes.
Councilor Boss.
Yes.
Councilor Gary.
Yes.
Councilor Lasagna.
Yes.
Councilor McLeod.
Yes.
First reading passes 6-0. Next, we have Order 125-110-22020, adopting the Lake Auburn Impact Study RFP. I'll entertain a motion at this time.
Second.
Councilor Gary, second for Councilor Milks. I'm going to open this up to the public for comment. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak? If so, use the raise hand feature on your screen. I scroll to the right spot.
Mr. Mayor, I would just state that we do have one of our work group members that's participating in this, Jason Polina, on Zoom as well, and that might be an opportunity, maybe during the not during the public comment, but at least to have a member of the work group participate.
Very good. Okay. Yes, I see him up there. Okay. Kelsey, is there anybody that would like to speak now?
One person just popped in. I'm going to give them a moment to raise their hand if they choose. No hands are currently raised.
Okay, very good then. We're going to move on to bring this into the council. We'll leave it open for Mr. Paulina since he's in there as well, just in case. Council, I'd like to actually turn over to the city manager, Brian, Councilor Carrier, and Councilor Gary. This is a city RFP process, so if you want to give us just a little orientation. We've had about 2 weeks. This RFP's been in our inbox looking at it. I know I've read it several times. Hopefully all the council has as well. So, but if you'd like to give a little bit of a primer.
Yeah, I can start, and I'd certainly encourage the councilors to chime in. I guess I would just start with that. The council, you created a work group consisting of Councilor Gary, Councilor Carrier, trustee from the Water District, Mary Sylvester, and trustee Jason Paulina. And then your staff representatives were myself, the Auburn Water District Superintendent Sid Hazelton, and our facilities manager, Derek Belanger. The group started meeting shortly after your appointment on September 8th. We started our meetings. In our first meeting, we took a look at a 2013 ordinance RFP that was already created that had not gone anywhere. There was a lot of work that was involved in that, and so the group decided to use that as our template moving forward. So we started reviewing the 4 categories that were outlined within what we wanted to see as far as impact. Those categories were economic impact, environment, regulatory, and community. Through the process of meeting, it was determined that what we would have most likely come up with for community impacts were already being addressed in the first 3 categories. Obviously, that means that if there's something that you feel needs to be added, that would be something that you could do, but the work group had reached that decision regarding community anyway. The original timeline was that we would be presenting this on the 19th, just timing for final editing and preparing the RFP, move this back to November 2nd. And then I would encourage the councilors to chime in on anything else you'd like to add.
Go first. I just wanted to, I've talked to most of you in regards to this, and just wanted to reiterate some of the stuff. We took some of this for granted. We had the Auburn Water District and the Conservation District were with us with this. We took and spoke with Sid, and basically what we've decided is because there's such confidence in the information and the reports that have been done, as you can see them listed here over the years, and the fact that all that work has been kept up on. It's not something that was just done and then left. We have a great amount of confidence in the information, and we've decided to use that as an addendum to this so that they can utilize that information, because we just think that it's complete insofar as the idea of this RFP. Now, I'm sure that if there's an issue that comes up, they'll bring that up to us, but we were very confident in the information that was being provided to us from the Lake Auburn Water District, and so we wanted to make sure that that was a part of everything that was going forward.
Council, any other comments, questions? Councilor Lasagna?
Thank you, and thank you for the work that you've done on this. I appreciate it. Just a couple of things. One, the last that you have on there is the 2013 RFP that was done. Since then, there has been some research done. Is that going to be considered as well?
The information that we got was, excuse me, from Mr. Hazelton is that all the information would come forward, because as the study was done in 2013, there has been continued work that would be brought forward with that.
Okay.
To bring us up to current times.
What Mr. Hazelton did provide was an update regarding the most recent alum treatment that was completed, and so we added that into the background. He provided that narrative, and we brought that in of what was done most recently.
So did you think that there were no additional studies that needed to be done? Again, you think that everything is complete, that as you move forward, you're not going to request that the person who is hired to this to look in to see if there needs to be more additional studies?
Well, we were confident in the work that Sid had done. If there's something that comes up during the study that has not been done, then I'm sure that they would bring that back to us and say that this, because we've asked them to look at multiple water districts, not just our own, we wanted to get a sort of a comparison of other water districts that were similar to ours and the problems that they were having. So I'm sure that if there was something that we have not been doing, although I find it sort of far-fetched that there's something that we're not doing, but should there be something that we're not doing, that I would hope that they would include that in their study.
And all RFPs have a, before RFP submission is done, they have a question period where they ask the initiator of the RFP any clarifying questions, i.e. do you have this study, that study, or, we will, because you do not, we feel that's imperative, we will be adding that to the scope of work. That traditionally happens in all RFPs. I'm sure, even the government RFPs that I've conducted, I'm sure that's the same way here.
The other issue, too, that we wanted to make sure that we covered is we've paid a lot of attention to the issue that we've had with the algae blooms, but we don't want that to be the sole focus of problems, because there are other problems that could occur. The algae bloom, yes, it stinks, it doesn't smell good, it doesn't affect the overall quality of the water, except for the smell, but there are other problems that would, so we don't want to keep that scope so narrow that that's the only thing that they're looking at. Part of doing this and being compared to other water districts was to look at overall the problems that we could run into with whatever's being thought of out here, whatever they come up with for possibilities. We don't want to say, oh, well, it's just going to be the algae bloom and that's going to be it. There may be other things that come up that we pick up from other water districts that we might need to address as we go forward with whatever we do out there.
I had one last question. This separates environment and economics into two separate categories when really they could be combined. There's something called environmental economics where they really inform each other. For example, if there's an algae bloom and the water is bad for a long time, that can affect recreation and all these other economic aspects. So to make sure that they're not so distinct from one another as opposed to being looked at as really that you can look at them as one issue.
Well, and I guess I'm speaking for myself solely, but the way that I looked at it is we were looking at economic and the ecology, but then it drives into the regulation. And I was looking at any changes that happen to the ecology would drive our regulations. The ecology would be affected by anything we do economically. So I didn't look at it quite like that, where it was the economy versus the ecology. But the two that I think are very important is whatever we decide to do as far as the ecology has to drive our regulations as far as what we're doing with it, because you can't have increased growth or whatever, or a certain aspect of it without having it go all the way through into the regulations part of it.
And if I could, let me just reread for everybody the summary. I always find this helpful. The purpose and intent of this project is to evaluate the impact of Lake Auburn as it pertains to economic, environment, and regulation for the City of Auburn. The outcomes of the evaluation will be used to help the Auburn Water District, Lake Auburn Watershed Protection Commission, Planning Board, and City Council adopt ordinance amendments to determine recreation and growth opportunities, ensure the drinking water quality is protected. So they're not separate. They are all together as part of one holistic package. So, I don't think any of us should read into it. If you remember where it kind of came from, the genesis of this, in part, was to understand what is the true cost of drinking water for all taxpayers in the City of Auburn. That was the genesis of this, looking at the regulations and what that means in order to truly see what our options were, and then it started evolving a little bit, which is good from there. A lot of this comes out in that RFP process as well. So some of the comments I think that Councilor Zani you have about the distinct separation or combination of environmental versus economic definitely should go out to staff who will be reviewing the RFP participants, the respondees. And at the end of the day, too, we have to approve the RFP, the final proposal, by the people who submit the proposal, if I remember back in our process. So those are something that we can use as an overlay, some of those questions, in your each individual determination of who the contract is awarded to.
And I just want to mention, when you talk about the true cost of water, I think we also want to make sure that we're not just talking about economic cost. It's really, what does it cost to make sure that we're preserving this body of water?
Well, again, the initial was, what does it cost to provide drinking water and potable water to the city of Auburn? That was, again, boiling it down to its base denominator. In other words, it's 1,200 acres of land around Lake Auburn that is not generating tax dollars or revenue. That needs to be factored in an analysis on what the cost of water is. Okay, what is that cost? You know, again, the simplest, lowest common denominator. There's a lot of tentacles that, you know, spill out from that, like what you're naming. But those happen when you're looking at the proposals and what it's going to influence the RFP process. Councilor?
And I was just going to say, it's not and we didn't look at it as, you know, as an overall cost just to the water district or just to the patrons, because it's actually, you're dealing with all of it together. So yes, you are talking about the water district and their customers, but in the sum total of it, you're talking about all of the citizens of Auburn, because one way or another, the citizens of Auburn pay into that overall in one way or another. So that's the grand scheme of things. And then as we go into the subject, it breaks it out individually. I would hope that they would break it out individually so that we have a true picture of what each component cost us or doesn't cost us, or the cost involved with it.
Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to get on this study group or to write the RFP, not just solely for the economic value or money potential we could make by being able to do more things on or around the lake. I came in on the other angle to look to make sure of finding ways to make sure to preserve the water quality that we have and find out all the sources that run into the lake to make sure that they're up to standards too. I am satisfied with the work this committee has done that my issues, my concerns are going to be addressed within this report, or I wouldn't have signed off onto this. Because there's more to it than what we can do financially.
Is there any more debate on this, Councilor Boss?
And I'm glad to hear your perspective, Councilor Gary. I think that what we're saying is two different sides of the same coin that I hope will be represented in the RFP. It's what is the economic cost of not recreating or not further utilizing that land, but also what is the environmental cost of additional recreation and additional uses. So my assumption is that will be provided as both of those sides of the same coin.
It's pretty
RFP.
clear, the RFP as it's written.
Yep.
On that, so looking at it from both angles. So it's a very fair approach and balance.
Yep.
So from the genesis of it, it's evolved, okay, and that's the whole point of doing an RFP. You take an idea and you make it into something that's holistic. I think they've done that. With that said, I'm going to ask for a vote at this point. Yes?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only minor amendment I would like to make to this.
You want to make an amendment?
I want to talk it out first, is where the consultant, when he gets done his report, it talks about it going right to the planning board. What I would like to see added would be the fact that it would come to the council as a presentation and then forwarded. I mean, it doesn't mean that we have to act or do anything, but at least give us it in hand, let the planning board do its thing, come back with its recommendations, and then we decide on what rules, regulations, and things we must act on.
Okay, I'm looking at this section if I could right now, and City Manager, jump in here too, but it does present options and planning board recommendations. So right now, it's present options to planning board for review. That's going to happen. Draft ordinances are done at the planning board level, and then it's a joint presentation by the planning board and the study partner to the city council through a workshop.
Right, but I would like the first step would, since we're paying for it, for when it gets done, that they come, give us a brief PowerPoint thing, hand it to us. The planning board can take it and do what it needs to do and then come back to us.
Do you want to add a sub? So I'm just going to,
Yes.
would you like to make a motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like a motion that when our hired consultant comes back with the study, that he or she or they do a presentation to us, first blush, of this report.
I'm going to paraphrase. So I've got a motion on the floor amending point 1, section D, final report outcomes. Whereas it currently reads, compare identified options in all 3 categories and make holistic recommendations to the city council on bundled improvements. Moving on to section 2, which would then be the planning board as written. Correct? Okay. So we have a motion to amend section D, subsection 1, for the holistic recommendations to first come to the city council before coming to the planning board. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Councilor McLeod. All those in favor? The motion passes 6-0. Very good. Okay. I'll now ask for a vote on the entire RFP, which is an actual order. So I'm going to ask for a roll call vote. It's an order.
You're doing a roll call?
Oh, I don't have to, but I mean, it's kind of fun to see it. Now I'll ask for a show of hands. All those in favor of the RFP as amended, please raise your hand. Seriously? Passes 6-0. For the one time this year, I was looking forward to breaking a tie. Give me no joy. None. Next, we're going to move on to Order 126-110222020, appointing members to serve on the Comprehensive Plan Committee. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion for Councilor Boss, second for Councilor Carrier. Okay. Right now, we have 4 nominations, or applicants, excuse me, 4 applicants in your packet. In alphabetical order, they are Jeremiah Bartlett, Dan Bilodeau, Bob Hayes, and Jonathan Labonte. At this point, I'm going to ask for nominations from the floor for any one of those 4 or anybody else that's not listed.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to nominate Jonathan Labonte as one of the members of this committee.
I have a motion from Councilor Gary to nominate Mr. Jonathan Labonte for the Comprehensive Comp Plan, Review Committee. Do I have a second? Second from Councilor Carrier. Carrier. Okay. Do I have any other nominations?
Mayor? I'd like to nominate Jeremiah Bartlett.
I have a nomination for Mr. Jeremiah Bartlett. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Councilor McLeod. Do I have any other nominations? Councilor Milks?
I'd like to nominate Dan Bilodeau.
Nomination for Dan Bilodeau.
Second.
Councilor Milks, second by Councilor Carrier. Are there any other nominations? None being? Okay. We'll close nominations at this time. We'll vote on the nominees in the order they were nominated. As a reminder, we're picking 3 people for the planning board, for the Comprehensive Plan Review Committee. These 3 people, one of the requirements, obviously there's 2, be a resident of the City of Auburn. Second, have served on the previous Comprehensive Review Plan Committee of 2010. All 3 of these nominations fit that criteria. I'll ask by a show of hands, all those in favor of Jonathan Labonte? I'm sorry, keep your hands up. 4, 5. Opposed? Mr. Labonte is approved by a vote of 5-1. Next, Jeremiah Bartlett. All those in favor of Mr. Jeremiah Bartlett, please raise your hand. Opposed? None being. Mr. Bartlett passes by a vote of 6-0. Just in case anybody want to give me that final chance to vote, just throw that out there. Dan Bilodeau. All those in favor? Opposed? None being. Dan Bilodeau is appointed by a vote of 6-0, and there goes my last option to vote this year. Thank you. Little things, people, little things. So we're good there. Those 3, I don't need to take a cumulative vote. I'm all set on that. Okay. I'll open this up to the second and last open session of the night.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I would just add, if you want to make note of who will be attending, will be part of that comp plan work group from planning and the school department.
Very good. So school department will be Dan Poisson. The planning board right now, I need some confirmation, but I believe it's Dana Staples and Stephen Martelli, though I'm looking for some confirmation from the chair of the planning board. I believe they're going to have some further discussion on that on November 10th. Myself will be on, Councilor McLeod, and Councilor Boss will be the city council reps. Okay. We'll have to believe that's everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, very good. Move on. Second and last open session of the evening. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak? If so, please state your name and address and limit your comments to 3 minutes, and you can discuss any business that's related to city business that is not on tonight's agenda. I see nobody.
No hands are raised.
No hands are raised at this time. We're going to be moving on. Reports. Mayor's report. None being. It's election day. Go vote. Tomorrow. Auburn. Councilor Boss?
Nothing at this time.
Councilor Milks?
At this time.
Councilor Lasagna?
I'll try and be quick with this. A lot happened at the school building committee meeting. One, I wanted to make sure, Councilor McLeod and I talked about making sure that they were looking at sidewalks as part of a system of sidewalks. They certainly are paying for their own, but to make sure that when they look at the plans, that they look at the sidewalks. Recordation, which is looking at the historical aspects of the building. They're doing all the photographing at this point so that they will have a record of everything. One of the things that we'll be talking about at our next meeting is the alternative, what are we going to take out of the plan and what are we going to add to it? Things like a greenhouse now is not, that definitely on there. Skylights that were on there are not, sunshades are not, and additional roof protection. So those are some things because of what's happening with the budget on that. The groundbreaking late March 2021, and we'll come up with a list of these, of the alterations next meeting. That is the ones that we decide that we're not going to put forward, and that happens on December 15th. And they're coming to the January council meeting.
We have a joint meeting on the 21st as well, so, okay.
Of the school committee.
Of the school committee, yes.
Yeah, the building committee will come in January.
January, the building committee, okay, very good. Okay. Councilor McLeod?
Nope, nothing tonight.
Councilor Gary?
Briefly, but off point slightly. The city is offering free rides, shuttle rides to the polls tomorrow for anyone that needs to go there. And there's going to be a vehicle that's handicapped, lift equipped, so that anybody that needs to ride has one. They just have to look at the city's website and call to arrange a ride.
Very good. No, thank you. Councilor Carey?
Our meeting will be Thursday night at 5:30 at the airport. It'll also be on Zoom. There's doing a hybrid meeting for those that can't attend. School board will be having a meeting on Wednesday where we will be discussing part of the stuff that the council brought to them in the last meeting about reviewing of the charter. And that's it.
Mr. Manager, and I do have one report too that I've been saving for last, but I'll wait to.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just add big thanks to our staff and volunteers that have been working on preparing for the election. A great deal of work has gone into this. We have a lot of volunteers. We've had volunteers in here every day working on either processing absentee ballots. As the mayor said, our last count that I'm aware of was 8,100 absentee ballots that were needed to be processed. And the team did an outstanding job, and our volunteers that have been coming in regularly to help do that. Tomorrow's obviously the big day, but I believe our staff and our team is well prepared to ensure that we've removed every barrier that we can think of as far as coming in and voting. We're trying to make sure that we have shelter outside of each of these polling locations for our weather, but we will do our best. We really encourage people to go ahead and check our website, the election hub, and get all the details that you need. Councilor Gary mentioned the transportation. If you don't have access to the website, just call Auburn Public Works. That's who's taking the calls and arranging the transportation. So if you call Auburn Public Works, they'll be able to make that schedule for you. Thank you.
Very good. I'm going to skip my report, actually. I'm going to save that for the next meeting. We have no additional executive sessions tonight. So at this time, I will entertain a motion to adjourn at 7:59 PM.
So moved.
Second.
Voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Hey.
None being. We now stand adjourned.
Good job.